Hey there, welcome to the video. I'm Dying Legacy and this is the Winterbite build, a Magicka Warden for solo content. This build is going to help you skate through those veteran arenas with ease such as Maelstrom and Vacheran. And you're going to have no problem keeping it chill while working your way through those veteran dungeons completely by your lonesome. This build boasts a high DPS and extreme healing. It's going to keep you alive during those most extreme onslaughts. This is a quick build guide. We'll be going over the race, attributes, mundus, food and potions, followed by the gear, skills, passives and champion point slottables. The info will be minimal, so I'll only be going over what's necessary. However, do feel free to comment and let me know if you want a full detailed guide or if there's anything I could do better. With that out of the way, let's get into the Winterbite build. Beginning with the race, this is entirely up to yourself, as every person has their own likes and dislikes, and every race has its own advantages, and of course every player has their own story. But if you're looking for suggestions, I'd recommend taking maybe the Breton for extra Magicka sustain, or you could take the High Elf for extra damage, and there's also the Khajiit, which is going to give you some extra critical damage and critical rating. For the attributes, we are putting 64 points into Magicka, and we're going to be taking the Lover's Mundustone for extra physical and spell penetration, specifically for when we're doing solo. However, if you do decide you want to try some group content with this, you could go with the Thief's Mundustone for some extra critical rating. For our food, we are using the Clockwork Citrus Fillet, which is going to give us max health, max Magicka, and some health and Magicka recovery. However, if this is a little too expensive for you, or you're not able to make it yourself, you could go and grab yourself the Witch Mother's Potent Brew, which can be gotten from the guild merchant, or you could make it yourself with easier to get materials. There's not much difference between the two, only that the Witch Mother's Potent Brew has slightly lower stats, but overall it doesn't make much of a difference. For the potions, we are using Essence of Spell Power, which is going to give us Major Sorcery, Major Prophecy, it's going to restore our Magicka, and give us Major Intellect, which is going to help us keep going during those longer boss fights. However, if you can't get your hands on any Essence of Spell Power, you can always use the Magicka potions that drop for normal enemies around Tamriel. They're not going to give us any bigger of a boost, but at the same time, they're very easy to get, and your bag is probably full of them. And some stats are far better than no stats. With that done, we'll move on to the gear. We're running 7 light pieces of armor on this build, and we're also using the Ring of the Pale Order, and we're also using a Maelstrom's Ice Staff on the back bar. Neither of these items are necessary. With this build, I have some options just in case, so don't worry about having them or not. Starting with the Ring of the Pale Order with a spell damage enchant and the Bloodthirsty trait. You can grab this from the Antiquity system. This item will restore 20% of the damage you deal as health, so this is going to be incredible for our self-healing and self-sustain. And when using this ring, we're going to be using one piece of a monster set on either the shoulder or the helm. Either or, it doesn't matter. With a Magicka enchant and the Divine's trait. And for this, we're going with the Slimecross set, which can be gotten from Wayrest Sewers on Veteran for the helm, or you can buy the shoulder from the Undaunted vendor in any of the major faction cities. This is going to give us a little bit of extra critical chance. However, if you do not have the Ring of the Pale Order, you can go and get yourself the Iceheart monster set from Direfrost Keep on Veteran, as that set will provide us with a shield when we do critical damage, which will make up for the healing as we can heal through it ourselves. And for the Maelstrom Ice Staff on our back bar, with the weapon damage enchant and the infused trait, you can get this from completing Maelstrom Arena. It comes in the perfected and unperfected depending on which difficulty you do the arena in. Perfected being veteran difficulty, and the only difference is that the perfected version comes with offensive penetration, but the stat increase is minimal, so it doesn't really matter. And when we have this equipped, our light and heavy attacks will deal additional damage to enemies in our wall of elements. However, if you don't have a Maelstrom weapon, or you just can't be bothered using one, you can always double bar our weapon for taking the Ice Staff variant of the front bar weapon, or you can grab yourself a willpower weapon, which you can get from the small mail satchels from doing random dungeons, or you can pick it up off the guild vendor. The willpower staff will just give us some extra stats. Now for our first 5-piece set on the build, we're wearing this on our chest, gloves, belts, pants and boots. all in divines and all with a Magicka enchant. And it is the Winter's Respite set, which can be gotten from Western Skyrim. You can get this from the overland content such as delves, public dungeons or world bosses, or you can even pick it up from the guild vendors. This set's going to give us some Magicka recovery and maximum Magicka, and it also comes with the ability of anytime we cast a ground ability, or anything that leaves an effect on the ground, it's going to create a circle of healing frost for us, restoring 3000 health every 2 seconds while we're inside that circle. And this effect can occur every 10 seconds, and it also lasts for 10 seconds. So we can keep this healing circle up all the time and continuously heal ourselves, regardless if we're immobile or if we're stunned. Now, next up is our jewellery and our weapons. Now, if you are using the Ring of the Pale Order, I suggest removing one of the rings and grabbing a head or shoulder item in its place. The head or shoulder will come with the Divine's trait and a Magicka enchant. And for our jewellery, we want the Bloodthirsty trait and we want a spell damage enchant. We also have a front bar weapon with this set, and it's an Inferno Staff with the Precise trait and the Frozen Weapon enchant. And we have 2 set choices for this. Our first set choice is the Bassi's Mania, which can be gotten from Rockgrove. There is a perfected version, of course, which you can get from the veteran difficulty of the trial. The perfected version comes with a little extra critical chance, but overall it adds weapon and spell damage and will give us minor slayer at all times. And it's going to increase our damage done to non-player enemies by up to 15% based on our missing Magicka. So the less Magicka we have, the more damage we're going to do. However, if you haven't stepped into the trial or it's just not your thing, you can always grab yourself the Mother of Sorrow set instead, which can be gotten from the overland content in Deshan, or you can get it off any of the guild traders. Mother of Sorrow is going to give us some extra Magicka and a whole pile of critical, so it's a fantastic set to use in this place, and it's much easier to get at the same time. And that covers the gear. And next we're going to cover the skills, starting with the front bar. First up, we have Deep Fissure. Morph this from Scorch. You can find this in the Animal Companion skill line. Stir a group of Shock that attack after 3 seconds, dealing magic damage to enemies in front of you, and enemies damaged are inflicted with Major Breach for 10 seconds. We are also using Screaming Cliff Racer. Morph this from Dive. This is also found in the Animal Companion skill line. Command a Cliff Racer to dive bomb an enemy, dealing 9000 magic damage. If you are more than 7 meters away from the target, you'll set them off balance, and you'll deal more damage the further away from the enemy you are. We are also using Fetcher Infection. Morph this from Swarm. This can be found in the Animal Companion skill line. Unleash a swarm of Fletchers to relentlessly attack an enemy, dealing magic damage over 10 seconds, and every second cast of this ability deals 50% more damage, and the Fletcher flies rip through the enemy's flesh, afflicting them with minor vulnerability. We're also using Blue Betty. Morph this from Betty Netch. This can be found in the Animal Companion skill line. You'll call a Betty Netch to your side, which will restore magic to you over 25 seconds and will grant you Major Brutality and Sorcery. And every 5 seconds, the Netch will remove 1 negative effect from you. We're also using Bird of Prey. Morph this from Falcon's Swiftness. This is also found in the Animal Companion skill line, and you'll invoke the Spirit of Agility to gain Major Expedition for 6 seconds, increasing your movement speed, and while this is slotted, you'll also gain Minor Berserk, increasing your damage by 5%. And for the ultimate, we are using Shooting Star. Morph this from Meteor. This can be found in the Mage's Guild skill line. Call down a comet to blast enemies, dealing almost 15,000 flame damage to all enemies in the area, knocking them down and stunning them for 2 seconds. After the impact, enemies in the target area take just over 4,000 flame damage every 1 second for 13 seconds. You'll also generate 12 ultimate for each enemy hit by the initial blast. Now, we're not going to be using this ultimate all too often. This is mostly here for the Mage's Guild passive, but if it is coming to the end of a fight and you have no reason to use our back bar ultimate, you can just fire this off for extra damage. And moving on to the back bar, starting with Unstable Wall of Frost. Morph this from Wall of Elements. You can find this in the Destruction skill line. Create an Icy Barrier, dealing frost damage to the enemies in the area every 1 second and applying Unstable Frost Shield for 6 seconds to yourself and also to allies if you're in a group. Chilled enemies will become immobilized for 4 seconds. And when the effect ends, the barrier will explode, dealing frost damage and also applying Unstable Frost Shield for 6 seconds to you and any nearby ally. We're also using Winter's Revenge. Morph this from Impaling Shards. You can find this in the Winter's Embrace skill line. conjure icy shards at the target location to skewer enemies in the area, dealing frost damage every 1 second for 12 seconds, and enemies hit or overcome with bitter cold, reducing their movement speed, and this ability has a higher chance to apply the chill status effect. Next is Scalding Ruin. Morph this from Fire Ruin. You can find this in the Mage's Guild skill line. Inscribe a rune of cosmic fire on the earth, which takes 2 seconds to arm and lasts for 18 seconds. And when triggered, the rune blasts all enemies in the target area for flame damage and an additional amount of flame damage over 14 seconds. We're also using Ice Fortress. Morph this from Frost Cloak. You can find this in Winter's Embrace skill line as well. Wrap a thick cloak of ice around you and your allies. The ice grants major resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance, and you also gain minor protection, reducing our damage taken by 5%. We're also using Leeching Vines. Morph this from Living Vines. You can find this in the Green Balance skill line. Grow vines to embrace yourself or the lowest health ally in front of you for 10 seconds. The vine heals the target for just over 2000 health each time they take damage, and this effect can occur once every 1 second. The vines apply minor lifesteal to the enemies that damage the target for 10 seconds, healing you and your allies for health every 1 second when damaging that enemy. And on to the ultimate on our back bar. This is Northern Storm. You can morph this from Sleet Storm. You can find this in Winter's Embrace as well. Twist a violent storm around you, dealing almost 4000 frost damage every 1 second for 8 seconds to enemies around you, and reducing their movement speed by 40%, and increasing your max Magicka by 15% for 30 seconds. You and nearby allies will gain major protection, reducing your damage and theirs by 10%. This is the main ultimate on the build. Whenever you get yourself 200 ultimate, you want to pop this straight away for an increase in your maximum Magicka for that damage reduction. And it's also going to help keep those enemies a little closer to you so they can't scurry off too quickly. With the skills out of the way, we're going to move on to the passives. We're going to skip the detail and just tell you what you need. Beginning at the top with the class passives in Animal Companions, you'll find Bond with Nature, Savage Beast, Flourish, and Advanced Species. You're going to want to take all of these. We're also for Green Balance. You're going to want Accelerated Growth, Nature's Gift, Emerald Moss, and Maturation. And of course, for the last class passive, there's Winter's Embrace. You'll find Glacial Presence, Frozen Armor, Icy Aura, and Pierced Cold. We want all of these as well. And onto the weapon passives. Into the Destruction Staff skill line, you'll find Trifocus, Penetrating Magic, Elemental Force, Ancient Knowledge, and Destruction Expert. You're going to want to take all of these. And of course, we're using 7 pieces of Light Armor. So in there, you're going to find Grace, Evocation, Spell Warding, Prodigy, and Concentration. We'll be taking all of them as well. Next up is the Fighter's Guild skill line. Now, we're not taking any of the moves from in here, so we just need one specific passive, and that is Banish the Wicked, which will help us to generate 3 ultimate whenever we kill an enemy. Under there, you'll find the Mage's Guild skill line. We have Shooting Star and Scalding Ruin, so we're going to want to take all of these, starting with Mage Adept, Everlasting Magic, Magicka Controller, and Might of the Guild. And the last of the guild passives are the Undaunted. In this skill tree, you're going to find Undaunted Command, which is going to restore 4% of the max health, stamina, and Magicka through synergies. And of course, Undaunted Metal, which is going to increase our max stats based on what kind of armors we're wearing. We'll get a 2% boost because we're only wearing one type of armor, but it's a boost nonetheless, so you definitely should take it. And in the Assault skill line, you can find Continuous Attack. Now, you don't need to take this skill. This is just handy for getting around the map, because if you put 1 point into Continuous Attack, you're going to gain Major Gallop at all times, increasing your movement speed on your mounts. It's very handy, but not necessary. And of course, there is our racial passives. So, regardless of what race you've taken, you're going to want to take all of the passives, be it the Breton, the High Elf, or the Khajiit, or whatever race you've decided to go with. And that covers the passes, but I do have one last handy one, which is in Alchemy. This is medicinal use. When using potions, the resulting effects will last 30% longer. This is handy to get as much out of our potions as possible. With the passes out of the way, we'll go over the champion point slotables, starting with the Warfare tree. And in here, we are using Fighting Finesse, which will increase the critical damage and critical healing we do. We're also using Deadly Aim to increase our single target damage. We're taking Thaumaturge to increase the damage of our damage over time effects. And we're also using Master at Arms to increase your damage done with direct damage attacks. And in the fitness tree, we're going to be taking the Boundless Vitality. We'll be taking Fortified for the increased armor, Rejuvenation for increased sustain, and we're also going to be taking Siphoning Spells to restore Magicka when we kill an enemy. And finally, in the craft skill tree, it doesn't really matter what you take here. Take whatever you think is going to be helpful for yourself, but within a solo environment, it can be handy to take Treasure Chest to increase the quality of items you find. There's also Rationer to add 10 minutes to the duration of the food we're using. There's Liquid Efficiency to increase the chance of our potions not being consumed. And there's also Steed's Blessing. This will increase our out of combat movement speed by 20% altogether. And that covers the Winterbite build. I hope you found it useful, and if you're looking for more builds like this, feel free to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. I have one up every week. If you have any thoughts or recommendations, or just want to let me know about the build and how it went for you, or just your thoughts in general, then please comment below and I'll happily talk back with you. And if you're looking for more content like this, you can find me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/dyinglegacy. I'm live right now. And that's it for the build. I've been Dying Legacy. This has been the Winterbite build for the Magicka Warden. Thanks for watching, and please, as always, be awesome.